Welcome back to the Dual Comm podcast. Here we are on episode 5. Another 2 weeks have flown by. Epos, how are the New Year's resolutions going? Because statistically, I think today, we're recording Friday the 17th, maybe it's the 18th, I think this is when people give up on their resolutions. This is typically the point of no return for most.
That's hilarious because I've effectively only started my year this week, so I'm kicking butt on them.
That's, you know what? I feel this is the first productive week I really had. Last week, routine was getting back into business. You and I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, but now I'm like reading the productivity books again, deep work, atomic habits, feel good productivity. I'm like pulling things back out. I will tell you one thing I changed that has absolutely like flipped this week on its head. I would sit in bed and I would scroll Twitter when I woke up. And I knew it was bad. I knew it was not good for me. And yet I craved it and it was easy to do. This last week I have replaced it. I get out of bed, I make the bed, I make coffee. And as soon as the coffee is done, I write in a Google Doc for 15 minutes. Just a stream of consciousness. I've done that the last 4 days. And I don't know what I was thinking with the Twitter thing, but I feel so much more mentally happy and prepared for the day. I don't know about any politics, any news events, anything in the first like 15 minutes. And it's such a little simple thing where I've always heard when people open their phone in the morning and scroll TikTok or do the dopamine social app craze, it ruins your morning. And I was like, whatever. Yeah. I'm a firm believer now.
Yes. I really struggle sometimes because there's that like 5 minutes when my kiddo hasn't woken up yet where I have to like get him up for school or whatever, where I'm just like, I'm checking YouTube comments or email or something. I'm like, I need something to wake me up. And thankfully I'm at the point where like I control it enough it doesn't affect my day, but I absolutely want to replace it with something. And I really think you're going to love the Digital Minimalism book if you haven't read it, because the big lesson is to not cut these things cold turkey and to replace them with higher quality activities, because then you don't want the junk food thing to do. You don't want to check Twitter when you're used to, journaling for 15 minutes every day or whatever. Like, you seek that out because it's so much more rewarding and you stop caring about the crap.
Yes.
Like,
well, I'm on that train now. And I think Atomic Habits mentions that too. Like, if you already have a habit established, like making coffee, that's a habit that I'm not removing. That is a ritual in the morning I look forward to. But to be able to enjoy my coffee and pair it with a new habit, like this morning journaling thing, right?
Right.
Not only is it something I look forward to because it's attached to the coffee, it now seems like it's a part of the coffee habit. And so, the digital minimal route, You got me pulled into this rabbit hole last year, and I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that later in the show, but it is a big show today. Yesterday on Thursday, the 16th, Nintendo officially revealed the Switch 2 for the first time, so we're going to talk about that. Speculation, there's not a whole lot to go off just yet, so we'll dive into it. Then, I got to see gaming on an OLED TV, Epos. I want to talk to you about that, pick your brain about some of the technology here, and again, maybe a little bit. I'm leaning more into that couch gaming experience. Let's be real.
Yes. I want to talk about Astro Bot for like every episode on this podcast, apparently. So that's fine.
All year. Can we talk about it all year long, dude? When you're sending me like the names of the levels where you just got to, and I'm ready. I platinumed the game and I already want to do another fresh playthrough. And it's like, that's a good... Good
my favorite thing is every time I tell you where I'm at and I'm like, this blew my mind, every single time you're like, well, there's something even better around the corner. And I'm just like, what?
I'm biting my tongue so hard because I typically like spoil and say too much. So I'm not going to, but I believe firmly in that statement. It just keeps getting better.
Yep.
Then we're going to take a viewer comment about Xbox exclusivity going into this next console generation. We got the January PS Plus free games and the new PS Premium games, and it is absolutely stacked. We want to talk about true 10-year games, some more Baldur's Gate 3 modder improvements and revelations, and then a little bit about Dragon Age Veilguard. There's been some updates there with the game director leaving the studio. And then finally ending with more PlayStation news. They canceled a couple of live service games, and I have a lot of thoughts about this one, Ecos. So let's roll back to the top. The Switch 2 revealed. And this, I have to admit, I felt a little lackluster at the reveal, only because with the Switch 2, there has been so many leaks. We've mentioned this on the show. We've seen pictures and mock-ups. We've heard just about all of the cool bullet points that they highlighted in this hardware reveal. It's a short video. It'll be linked down below. It looks pretty cool. What are the main features and the differences that we saw, at least in the video that they shared?
It's bigger. The Joy-Cons are completely redesigned. They don't even slot on anymore. They like stick in.
Yep.
Lots more curves to it. An extra button that we still don't really know what it does. The dock is a little bit more kind of flexible and adjusted for it. They confirmed backwards compatibility. They also showcased a optical sensor or laser sensor in the Joy-Cons, almost as if it could be used as a mouse. And some people are concerned that backwards compatibility will be kind of hit and miss because it might be missing the IR blaster from the original Joy-Cons. So that will be interesting to see. But then Hall effect joysticks, which is a huge deal, at least if you've paid any attention to the Steam Deck fans and controller fans as of late.
What about fans? What? My brain broke. Sorry.
The people fans, not the literal fans.
Oh.
So Hall effect joysticks are. I guess
it is in the morning, everybody.
Components.
I'm leaving that pause. It's not going to be edited out. I had to Google what Hall effect joysticks were. By the way, this is not like officially confirmed. It's based on the fact that there was a patent that Nintendo took out regarding this. But if they move in this direction, I'm pretty stoked. And I would hope, like, PS5 is still traditional sticks, right? They're not Hall effect either.
Correct.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, Hall effect joysticks are joysticks that instead of using a traditional kind of, it's still analog, but a traditional analog sensor where it's like spring-based to detect which direction the joystick's going and whatever, that gets worn out pretty easily, at least these days. I am someone who has never had stick drift in any controller, and I still have controllers from when I was a baby, but there are people who will go through like DualSense controllers, DualSense, that's what it's called. Yeah, DualSense controllers, like left and right, because they keep breaking the joysticks or getting stick drift or whatever. And the biggest like widespread problem everyone had with the original Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch was stick drift, where that sensor would get worn out and the sticks would just start moving on their own or start going different directions. And these are, the Hall effect ones are magnetic based, so they're supposed to be a little bit more accurate, and they don't end up wearing out in the same way that would cause this. There's been a huge movement to, and I even have the parts for it, I just haven't done it yet, to replace the Steam Deck joysticks with Hall effect ones. People have made slot-in replacement ones. There's fancy controllers that have Hall effect joysticks. It's been this whole movement among enthusiasts to stop this problem because controllers are just like turning into e-waste super quick for people who can't fix them. And as you mentioned, Nintendo has a patent of some sort for Hall effect joysticks that theoretically would mean, especially given it was like the biggest problem facing the console itself that virtually everyone has complained about. It's easy to put two and two together and say, hopefully, this is them fixing it, but we don't know for sure if that's actually in the system yet.
It looked like that dome style that the Steam Deck ones use. Yeah. And like I have to imagine that they zoomed in so heavily on that render in the video to emphasize that. Yeah, there was 2 big class action lawsuits in like 2019 and 2020 against Nintendo for the stick drift that happened. I will say I've encountered stick drift on a handful of different pads over the years, and a lot of it can come down to just manufacturing imperfections. It's not a perfect process. A lot of our games now too, I'm just going to mention, like with the new PlayStation 5, I've got a fresh little DualSense that's about a month old. Guess what it does when I enter photo mode in Horizon? That left stick pulls me back. In the photo mode for that game, the dead zone is so tight and so small that I do have stick drift that pulls back to the back. I think if you go back to some older games, those initial dead zones before it activates is so massive. This is like a double-edged sword, and the only reason I know a lot about it with like Xbox is Halo, because they've given us such granularity to control the dead zones, the curves, everything. I mean, you practically need a 2-hour course just to set up your sensitivity in Halo Infinite. It's a lot that they give you access to. But if you...
I'm glad...
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm glad that they give us the options, though, because I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
To this day, I have an absolute, like... This is a strong word, but hatred for the Xbox One controller and the Xbox, like modern Xbox controllers, for the changes that they made over the 360.
Yep.
And I could go on and on about those. Maybe that'll be a separate episode. But one of the things I ran into early on when I first got my Xbox One and started trying to play MCC before Halo 5 came out was aiming felt completely wrong. And even when I do the backwards compatible for Black Ops 1, I'm like, that's a game I've put bajillion hours into. I know how to play. It didn't feel right. And I'd go back and forth between 360 and Xbox One. 360 I would play fine on. Xbox One, I'm like, what is happening? And it was due to completely differently calibrated dead zones and all of these controller things that mattered enough to the Halo community that 343 went through and put in this incredibly granular, complex system for. But like you said, you basically need to watch a 2-hour video to understand how to tune any of it.
I literally could talk for the next 30 minutes on this. When they introduced the modern aim system in MCC and the end point here to get back into the Switch, I think aiming has felt garbage in Halo 5 onward. I think Infinite and Halo 5, no matter how much tuning you do, just feels pretty rank. And you can look at most pros if they set their controller down. They lock that dead zone so small, their controller's always drifting. It's always, unless they're holding an angle, like, and their hands are on it. It's anyway. So the Hall effect thing sounds really cool. The mouse idea was floated when we saw the third-party like accessory manufacturer showing off their little accessories, a few weeks ago. I think we even mentioned that on the last episode. That seems interesting. I'm not sure I would want to hold something like a mouse that is so vertical. I feel like you could just twist your wrist and it just would collapse. So it seems like a gimmick. But the IR sensor thing, you bring up a good point. They do mention that the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible with Switch 1 games. Most of them, not all of them. And they put in here Switch 2 exclusive games. So I think that's the verbiage they're going to use moving forward. If it's a game that is only Switch 2 or Switch 2 enhanced or whatever, they've got that distinction now. If you think about the Switch Lite, there's a lot of games like Super Mario Odyssey where, since you can't detach the Joy-Con, the motion controls typically have an alternative. I think the list of games is going to be pretty small, maybe like 1-2 Switch or the boxing game or something that it's not supported. And I feel like this is pretty typical. I mean, even PlayStation 5 to PS4 backwards compatibility, there's always going to be a list of some games that are not going to make it. I am thrilled. Honestly, I think it's not a very sexy reveal because it doesn't do anything that moves the Nintendo unique twist or stupid gimmick forward. It's the same thing, but a little bit bigger, a little bit more horsepower. They already were sitting on the best-selling console of all time. The library for Switch 1 is immense. So I'm super excited to see that the backwards compatibility is staying there, that they didn't introduce like the Nintendo jump rope, which requires you to like do 50 jumping jacks in all of your games. Or they always throw something stupid, like a weird gimmick, and sometimes it's fun and sometimes it destroys the console, like in the Wii U's case. And I'm happy that they played it safe. With that being said, they showed off the new Mario Kart game, which when I watched the reveal the first time, I couldn't tell if it was just a new track for Mario Kart 8. It was in our Discord chat that Blizzard Ball pointed out. It looks like it's a 24-player Mario Kart game, which would indicate, it's the new MK title. Graphically, that would have not been my choice to showcase as your first blip of Switch 2 gameplay, because my gosh, it's underwhelming and looks just like MK8. I'm excited to put in perspective. I've already mentioned this. I'm there day one. I am such a huge Switch fan. Like, this was my favorite thing in gaming the last 7-8 years. I'm thrilled because in the show, I'm just going to put a bunch of Switch gameplay footage today. But with all that being said, I am curious, what was just the gut reaction when you saw the gameplay?
Overall, to me, this is the first time I've ever seen Nintendo play it this safe.
Yeah.
From the gameplay, from the hardware to the gameplay. Because we were speculating the past couple episodes, like, how is Nintendo going to respond to these leaks? Because we know Nintendo is not afraid of sending a band of hitmen to your door for mods, for piracy, for whatever.
Yeah.
And these are extensive leaks that like Nintendo does not tolerate.
Yep.
And their response is to shadow drop a trailer that wasn't even named Switch 2. It was just an update from Nintendo.
Yep.
Just completely under the radar, shadow, as much as could be for what it was. Shadow drop, basically just a confirmation of the leaks. They showed nothing new. We got no new information other than Mario Kart. They just said, yep, those leaks were right. Here's what we have. No gimmicks other than potentially the mouse thing. No revolutionary thing. They're not trying to upsell us. They're just like, yes, this is the next Switch. It is exactly like you know, but hopefully better. And here's a game. And I'm looking at the game, and everyone's memeing on the Donkey Kong right now because he looks kind of goofy. Graphically, could not possibly tell a difference between it and even the Wii U Mario Kart, honestly. But I'm wondering if that hint, that 24-player thing, is the little secret Easter egg. Maybe that's the thing. They know they can't deliver a PlayStation 5. But what they can do is start to change gaming in some other way, because Nintendo always alters how we play games. Not the way games look, but how we play them. So maybe it's just going bigger. The Switch is literally going bigger. Maybe the games are going bigger. Bigger multiplayer. Maybe they have a lot more investment in multiplayer. Maybe they have, I don't know. But there's got to be something. Nintendo doesn't just iterate plainly. There's always something. And I know they are terrified of the like Nintendo doomed trope of the second console failing. And I know they're trying everything they can to not do it. But there's something. And I think gameplay-wise, it's Mario Kart. I'm going to play it because I love Mario Kart, but I am expecting nothing crazy from it. But a 24-player match of Mario Kart is going to be insane. And I think that's where the secret lies, in that thing that they didn't say, because all they were saying was the leaks were correct.
I think you just nailed it, by the way. I thought about it. The new Mario Kart is 100% going to be Switch and Switch 2. So it's going to be one of those titles that is released on both. And you probably don't want to be like, here's the huge disparity. This is not your show off the new tech kind of game. Metroid Prime 4, in my mind, seems like that'll be the one where they really push like the Nintendo Switch 2 enhancements. But even from the Prime 4 trailer, again, huge Prime fan, I was pretty underwhelmed. But it's about the gameplay. That's the whole reason I love the Switch. It's for Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey and Echoes of Wisdom, and I could continue going with this long list. They care about making fun, gamey games, which you and I talk about all the time. I don't ever pick this thing up really for the hardware, but I think they did exactly what they needed to do, and the hype probably wasn't there as much because, let's be real, the last 9 months, every Nintendo YouTuber has taken every tiny molehill, built it into a mountain. Any drip little piece of knowledge has become a 30-minute speculation video. So since you and I dabble in this world, I feel like we've seen the leaks at this point. Now, let's... go for it.
In a way, responding to basically widespread sensationalism and like overhype with the opposite of that is kind of a power play too. Like, it's kind of subverting all of that and just like, we are that confident in what we're doing. We're just giving you the baseline announcement. Like, to me, that's almost a power play.
Yeah. Come back in April. So there will be a Nintendo Direct focused on the Switch 2 on April 2nd of this year. There will be a public hands-on tour called the Nintendo Switch 2 Experience. It begins on April 4th in New York. There's a bunch of different locations around the world where you can go and get tickets. That sounds pretty cool. Expected release date, probably May or June. If we look back at the Switch 1, that's kind of the playbook from last time. You're direct, and then it releases thereafter. The speculation is $400 for the console, but there's been nothing to confirm this, by the way. Some people are like, I found the JSON file, and it clearly was like the fan render. So there's a lot of just misinformation still happening about this thing. $70 for Switch 2 games. That seems kind of par for the course.
Hurt so much.
You know, Tears did that. There's a few games that have moved that direction. And they do want to avoid the stock shortages that we saw with the PS5 and the Series X. Price point, before we get into the, rumored tech specs and features, what do you think of $400 for the console? Switch 2, I believe, launched at $300, or Switch 1 launched at $300.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. Like, that's fine. I picked up my Switch probably around $250. I probably paid a lot more for the OLED. For me, it's the game prices that bug me. With traditional AAA gaming going $70, it sucks, but like I almost exclusively buy games on sale. And that's
Good
not,
luck.
as we have discussed many times with Nintendo games, that is not a thing.
No.
And so to me, that's going to hurt a lot more, especially for a kid-focused platform. I think that's a bit misconstrued because, yes, Nintendo has a couple of those, but so many of their games launch at like $40, not even $60. Like, they have a lot of games that don't even launch at full $60. So I think we are going to see their big games probably try to grab that extra $10, but I don't think you're going to be expecting to pay $70 for like every game you buy.
Their pricing makes so little sense. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, $60.
Yeah.
Fairly low effort port. Okay. Metroid Prime Remastered. They rebuilt the whole game in the updated engine. They updated the visuals. It's insane. $40.
Yeah, I want to understand how they, like, is Metroid just in a lower tier and Luigi's technically a Mario property, so it's in a higher tier? Like, how do they decide this?
They go into a room, and for a few weeks, people look for the smoke that comes out of Nintendo HQ, and when it changes color, red is $70. Metroid always is priced in a weird spot because they know it just won't sell, unfortunately.
Right.
But yeah, their pricing for software is rough. But the problem is, just like with an Apple ecosystem, the Nintendo tax,
that's
some of their games are just good enough where you're down to play it. Smash, Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they typically don't miss.
Right.
But then there's some things where it's like their quality bar is so far in the past. The performance of Echoes of Wisdom on the Overworld is so chunky and rough, and you're just like, why didn't you just pare back the effects here, Nintendo? There are, speaking of rough edges, their online ecosystem. So let's talk then about what the rumored specs are for this thing. Now, it is all speculation here. There's been leaks and whatnot, but the idea that's been floated is it's believed to support visuals comparable to the PS5 and the Series X with ray tracing and Unreal Engine 5 capabilities.
No.
Yeah, I know. I think Eurogamer is way overestimating here. So
I'm so confused. They leaped from like the first original speculation run that everyone was confident in was PS4 Pro level.
Yes.
And now we're just jumping to this No.
Well, the way it's being pitched is what we talked about last time. It's its own unique, much lower hardware specs than what a PS5 or Series X would be, but it's got all the cool upscaling tech. It's got AI stuff, EPOS, and so maybe it can do some trickery to make it look pretty flashy, but it's rumored also to be an 8-inch LCD screen instead of an OLED at launch to reduce the initial cost and allow for more internal storage. This one I do kind of believe because, let's be real, 3 years into Switch 2, they're going to make an OLED Switch 2.
They are. I'm torn because part of me is like, well, dang, the Switch OLED looks so good that's pretty disappointing. But also, I'd kind of like a little bit of a bigger screen. I'm getting older. I like my bigger screens.
Yep.
Maybe it'll be fine. Specs-wise, I think it's ridiculous. Even with the PS4 Pro stuff people were talking about, even if it has hardware that technically could be considered comparable to the PS4 Pro's hardware, they are going to have it downclocked and limited in such a significant way to run off a battery and keep up battery life and not overheat that it's not going to play games that well. I do think you're right that we're going to see some sort of upscaling tech, maybe DLSS, but I think it's purely going to be for docked mode. And I do think there's a benefit. We talked last time about, in my whole giant breakdown of these AI upscalers and stuff, the biggest advantage here will be getting your TV's native resolution output.
Yeah.
Because outputting a Switch to a 4K TV is a very rough time. You have to rely on your TV scaler, which can be laggy. It can look like garbage, whatever. Just using the hardware to, even if it's not fancy AI upscaling, even if it's just Xbox 360 style, like the game's running at 720p or 1080p and we're outputting it at 4K is immensely a huge benefit over the current Switch. And I will be grateful for that. I literally run my Switch through the RetroTink to get 4K output, not even using fancy scaling stuff, but just to have the native picture on my TV so that it plays better. Like that's all we need there. I think performance-wise, we're going to see a Switch that hopefully runs at a locked 1080p 60, and those games that really struggle will hopefully not struggle as much. And then in 5 years, the games will start struggling again because Nintendo does not care about that, and that is fine. I'm not, but like...
I'm a little concerned that the reveal trailer was in 1080p.
Yes, right?
It was. Yeah, it's the first thing I checked. I clicked the little quality wheel, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go again." Because my guess with this, they saw the leaks and the rumors. They knew coming to CES there was going to be tons of opportunities for their junk to get leaked. Right. Those renders that they built clearly look like something they've sent to the graphics department or whoever they outsourced to build those graphics, and they went to the video team and said, "What can we put together?" Right. We are working right now on that bigger direct. All of those renders and clips seem like just plates, as we call in video editing, that you could throw together with some easy graphics. So my guess is they probably weren't planning on revealing it in January.
This was not the intended marketing move.
Yeah, but I think you're right. They found a nice like power play. No, we're not telling you what it is, but it's here. And so knock it off.
Like they immediately dominated the conversation. We went from CES, all of these companies matter because they're leaking, to Nintendo being like, here's what we have. And even though theoretically it's no new information, that's all anyone wants to talk about now. And that's fine.
Likely to use eMMC storage, offering faster load times than a hard drive, but slower than that of a solid state drive, and powered by a custom NVIDIA chip featuring DLSS upscaling technology, enabling native 720p visuals to upscale to 4K. That sounds probably spot on. We have seen a confirmed new Mario Kart game. Possible cross-gen titles we know about could be Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokemon Legends Z through A. Other potential titles, the rumors have floated that Final Fantasy VII Remake, Hi-Fi Rush, and Persona 6 might be coming to the console.
I just can't imagine Final Fantasy VII.
It's
so big. Like, I don't want to do the too big for Switch thing, but like, I can't imagine it.
Didn't the Gamescom behind closed doors rumor, apparently like developers got a showcase of like Switch 2 stuff behind closed doors. Nintendo denied it, but there were a lot of places that covered it. And I think FF7 was one of the games that they showed off. I could be wrong. Maybe it was the Matrix, whatever it's called, the tech demo they made with the Matrix thing. We will see.
Yeah.
The Switch 2 hardware, like you were talking about and what we heard, aligns closer with last-gen consoles like the PlayStation 4, but it leverages cutting-edge tech like DLSS to enhance performance. So trickery to get that nice upscaling, but I am not expecting PS5. I'm not even expecting the PS4 Pro stuff. That seems ludicrous to me. I hope you're right. I hope they are embracing 4K. If this is another like 1080p console, this will be more a handheld thing for me if that's the case. I think that's it that we know about so far. Did I miss anything that you can think of?
No, that's all we got to work with at the moment. I mean, it's a big handheld. I'm curious if they're going to do a light at some point because it is so much bigger. Like portability wise, people are not going to be as stoked on that. As someone who uses it with a big old grip and sits down and doesn't travel with a Switch that much, I'm fine with it. And playing docked, obviously, it doesn't matter. But I am curious if it will harm the portable child market that wants something to stick in a tiny bag.
I think you're right. They'll definitely have a light SKU. If they follow the same playbook. The light was super cool. If they would have let the light dock, I would have bought one so quickly.
Right?
You know, it seems every time I go to the store and I see it in the little shelf, I'm like, well, that's adorable. That is what I want to throw into a bag or take on a trip. I did not enjoy taking Switch 1 anywhere because of its size. I felt like embarrassed, like pulling out a little carrying case and stuff. So I would always, if I flew, I'd just take the 3DS. The clamshell, it was just perfect. And I don't know, I like this ecosystem of the handheld thing. But for me, the use case is playing it in bed. That's really the only time I'm using the handheld mode. On a road trip, sure, I'll take that thing. But if I'm flying, there's like no chance. And with Switch 2 being bigger, it's going to be home or road trip.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I'm hoping they improve the online services. There's a few areas we mentioned that they're just so far behind on.
They will need to for Mario Kart. But yeah, there was talk a couple years ago about how there's notes in like the code for Nintendo Online Services talking about like checks for Windows 98 and stuff. Like they have always had a poor online experience, both in terms of like performance, the friend system, which has gotten a lot better. Like it's been a mess. I've been playing, we got my kiddo Splatoon 2 for Christmas, and so that's pretty much online only.
Yep.
And we've been playing a little bit of it. And like the matchmaking is serviceable, but it definitely feels like leaping back to like 360 days. Like it's mostly peer-to-peer. It really struggles when it can't find all the right people. Like it has a hard time. And it reminds me that no, matchmaking was not necessarily that much better back in the day. So I hope it gets better, especially if you're going to put 24 people in one lobby. I don't know. It's hard because I don't know if Nintendo's going to do things like the social tools, like voice chat and things like that, because of their kind of strict privacy protection stuff, because it's a kid's console. I don't know how far they'll go with it. I don't know if they'll really try to take it to the next level, or if they're focused on more of the party game experience, because that's always kind of been the thing with Smash and Mario Kart and Mario Party. Like it's all been about, sure, you could connect some people online, but really you just want to get that many people together. And they had some crazy demos with the original Switch of doing like 4-player split screen on the Switch itself when it was like in kickstand mode. So yeah, I'm wondering if they're like, we got an 8-inch screen so you can fit 8 people now.
They're on a rooftop at a party in New York. They pass it around the Joy-Cons. It's like, let's play Mario Kart on my 1.5-inch by 1.5-inch quadrant on this screen right here. But, you know, as a kid, I would have eaten that stuff up. I told you I played through all Halo 3 Legendary Co-op with my roommate on a 17-inch TV in college. It was so tiny. I think aim assist was actually easier. Like throwing it back when they did the last MLG event for Halo, they didn't have enough setups for it. StarCraft, League, it was all the hotness at the time. And like for pool play, they had split screen setups where it would be 2 TVs, 2 Xboxes. You'd be teaming top and bottom with your teammate. And I think the aim assist was like legitimately easier when it was on that size. I could be wrong, but
that's
anyway.
Hilarious.
What were you going to say?
But yeah, I was going to say my favorite school-related gaming experience was with the DS and it was mostly just the normal DS, because it had that download play thing. So one person would have Mario Kart, and then all of us could still play Mario Kart with them without having the game. And so whatever game it was, we'd bring our DS, and it would just stream the game to each of us, and we could all play multiplayer like in between classes or whatever. Like the craziest things. I want to see Nintendo do something crazy for multiplayer again.
Yeah. I super appreciate what you said, and I think it's important to make the note. I don't want to see Nintendo give up its focus on killer single player, awesome couch co-op, because they're the last real gigantic publisher that I feel like is as focused on that and delivering those kind of experiences. But it doesn't excuse the fact that they're gaming. Yes, but it doesn't excuse the fact that they're like legitimately 15 years behind with some of their online infrastructure at this point. So it can be improved without sacrificing the other side. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm hyped for this thing. I hope it's May. I hope it's June, because like we talked about in the previous episode, I am happy in PlayStation 5 world right now. There are so many games that I want to finish, and I'm not ready to dive into a big, fresh, new ecosystem.
Yeah.
But I will say, for me, pound for pound, the last 7-8 years, my Switch has so many happy memories on it. It nailed everything that I liked for the stage of life that I'm at right now, and I'm doing it again because Nintendo's first party games just give joy. You know, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Odyssey, Smash, they are so good. If you like those kind of games,
yes, that
I have no problem. The $400 seems probable. Seems a little high.
Yeah.
I would think $350, but we will wait and see. Why don't we?
I have one wish list item I want to throw on it.
Oh, yes, please.
It's super technical. I think Nintendo could make it work. On the Steam Deck, you now these days have the option to change the display's refresh rate based on what you expect your game to run at. So like, for a lot of games that only run at 30 FPS, or you can only hit like 40 or 45 FPS, you can downclock the screen to run at 40 hertz or 30 hertz or whatever. I feel like Nintendo could work with the game devs to have a toggle where the game automatically just shifts the Switch screen itself for handheld mode to a 30 hertz or 40 hertz mode for the games that truly cannot hold performance. And I think that would be huge, and I think Nintendo could do it a way where it's invisible to the user. You don't gotta expect them to be nerds.
Yep.
I think that would be huge, because a rule I'm setting for myself is I am so stoked for the new Dynasty Warriors Origins game. It looks amazing, but it's $70, and I'm still in the middle of Hyrule Warriors. So my rule is I need to finish Hyrule Warriors first. But it runs like doo-doo. It is the same kind of engine as the later, the Tears of the Kingdom and stuff. Like that same visual style. And so often it is a slog fest. And I feel like that kind of feature would make it feel a little bit more snappy. Yeah. And I think Nintendo could pull it off.
And it would save battery life too in handheld mode.
Absolutely.
So that's genius. Well, why don't we shift then to a game that brings both of us joy, Astro Bot. It's the weekly Astro Bot fill-in. Was Astro Bot just in the right place at the right time? You brought this idea to me, and I think it is so ripe for discussion. So share with the audience where this idea started.
So I think first and foremost, I think if Astro Bot had released like 5 years ago, it would have done great, but it would not be the Game of the Year market dominating success that it was this past year.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be coming around on like year 5 to a bunch of those YouTube video essays of this underappreciated title that should have led Sony to the future or whatever. But I got on this because I discovered that Astro Bot started technically 12 years ago. In 2013, there was a launch title, which I have never seen. I'm guessing it wasn't on mine. It was supposed to be preloaded on all PS4s.
It's on mine.
Oh, that's funny. I got mine super late, so maybe not. But a launch title that was basically a tech demo for the PS4 called The Playroom.
Yes.
He wasn't called Astro Bot yet. He was called Asobi, the developer name. But it was just this little tech demo where you got to interact, use the touchpad, which was this whole new thing on the DualShock 4, and interact with the robot. And they had a lot of that stuff developed. And then 3 years later, they put out the Playroom VR as a tech demo for PlayStation VR. But at that point, which was nearly 10 years ago now, they had Astro Bot built. It was a 3D platformer with coin collecting. You hunted down all the bots. And even the mechanic, which I have always wondered about, where you have to hit or kick the bots to capture them and put them in your controller, that came from the VR game because Astro Bot would literally punch them towards the player's perspective, the VR perspective, so that you could see what you caught. And so all they're doing is repurposing that. And so Astro Bot has been 10, 12 years in the making. It's not this fresh new idea or like finally someone went back in time and made an old school game. Like they have been making the same game or like building on this idea for a very long time. They also had a third one, which is where Astro Bot, the name came in, called Astro Bot Rescue Mission in 2018 as another VR title. And so I think what we're seeing as the formal Astro Bot game finally released, and obviously we had Astro's Playroom as well as a PS5 launch title to, again, tech demo the DualSense controller. I think what we're seeing is a right place, right time of they've been building up all of these tech demos for Sony, showcasing the touchpad, the DualSense, VR. Clearly the studio was brought on to just explore what the PlayStation 4 and 5 were capable of, which is really neat. Obviously Sony does this with a lot of studios. But then they finally reached a point where they were like, hey, make an actual game now. And they took all of those lessons right at when we are peak, everyone's fed up with AAA games as a service, whatever complaints they have about the market, and released just a solid standalone game that over-delivers, integrates everything they learned from their VR games, from their controller manipulation stuff, everything, and put it in this one game that was a passion project of love.
Yeah.
And I think had it released a year or two even sooner, or even in a year or two, it would not be taken the same way. Like, I think it is true lightning in a bottle. This was the moment we needed this kind of game.
Yes. Yeah. I think spot on. There's elements here that we talk about a lot. Team Asobi had a strong idea. Mm-hmm. That idea came from Super Mario 64. I mean, at the Game Awards, they practically had to bite their tongue to not say Nintendo, but they literally said, thank you, Nintendo, for pushing platformers this way. We took in, I was surprised, okay? I wanted to see like the Sony exec's face when they're like, are you kidding me, dude? No, don't. But I loved that. And Astro Bot is in many ways just iteration on Super Mario 64, done with modern aspects. There are so many elements of the gameplay. You can look at the little blasters from Sunshine, and I've seen videos that compare plenty of things from Odyssey and Sunshine and all of the different Super Mario mechanics and show it in Astro Bot, and those videos are always like, it's so derivative, it's awful, and it's like, no, I think you're missing the point here. The game is exceptional. They took a really great foundation, they put their unique spin on it, and it shows that the world wants and needs great 3D platformers like this, cute games that bring joy. The games we grew up with. Sony's world, as we've mentioned, cannot only be quadruple A, Last of Us, gigantic 30-hour cinematic story games. And you are right. If the Astro Bot released in 2023, it would not have won Game of the Year. I don't think it would have landed all of the good feels and the hype. And it feels like the remedy to the junk we've been going through from live service. The industry has gone through a lot since the pandemic, and Astro Bot did land in the right place at the right time to get attention, but they followed the route that we really enjoy. Developers had a vision, they had a passion, they continued to build on it. They didn't go, well, Astro Bot's VR games just didn't really pan out, so you know what we're going to do? We're going to make an Astro Bot Battle Royale live service extraction shooter. That's what we're going to do, Epos, and that's how we're going to get the Fortnite kids into Astro Bot. They stuck with it.
Or we're going to put Team Asobi on backup janitorial duty on Concord or something like Xbox did with all or Activision did with all the...
So I have never played a VR game. I've experienced like 5 seconds of a putt-putt VR experience on one of those like cell phone VR things. So not true VR. I want for Gran Turismo 7 PlayStation VR 2, but I definitely am not going to invest the money to do that anytime soon. I also feel like I have a PC. I feel like viewers and listeners would be screaming, buy a PC headset. It can play so many more games. But I really would like to experience, since we both loved Astro Bot so much, these VR Astro Bot games.
Yes. I hate that I genuinely started considering at what point I could pick up a PSVR headset just because of that. Like, I want to play these games. And I think that's a problem with some of the tech demo strategies that Sony takes is they make some games that could be widely appreciated, but are kind of inaccessible or inherently niche because they are tech demos. Like, you cannot, for the most part, play these games without the VR headset, and that just immediately limits who can play it. And I want to get one. I want to get a PSVR 2. I want to play Astro Bot's Rescue Mission and the Playroom VR. And there's quite a few PSVR games at this point. I know there's been news that Sony's maybe investing not as much moving forward into games for that, so it's not a great investment purchase. But until we get some sort of cross compatibility for the headset, I don't like, how else are you going to play the game? And so it's hard, but it is super expensive. It is.
I think they were on sale for like $350 in the US here over Christmas, but doesn't it retail at like $500 or $600 or something? Like, it's a lot. I
saw it at like $489.
Okay. Yeah. But
that's still, that's a console.
Okay. It is a console.
I'm sorry. If you get the Horizon Call of the Mountain bundle, it is $600.
No, that's not happening.
That's a PS5. That is a PS5.
This might be a end of this generation pickup for me. Yes. I get motion sick pretty easily, so part of my fear with all of this is there's no chance I want to invest in something where I will move in a game for 2 seconds and immediately feel the spins, you know? Yeah. I didn't have that when I was younger, but now that I'm getting older, like, just stupid things stress. Literally, I will get little short moments of motion stuff if I'm super stressed for multiple days or whatever. So
that's crazy.
I don't know. But if you think about the cinema industry, the big studios typically will pursue what is profitable. And obviously, there's always been trends in media and in entertainment. I compare it to the obsession with the superhero, cinematic universe pursuit. It was really fun to ride the Marvel wave through Endgame. I enjoyed it, but I was off the bus the moment we wrapped up the Endgame saga. I don't even know if that's like the last movie for that phase or whatever, but it was a fun ride. What was not fun is watching the aftermath of studios still trying to chase that ride, and people were fatigued of it. I think most would say similar. It worked because it was fun and it was enjoyable, but we can't have everything moving forward being a 45 movie saga over the next 20-ish years. So when an audience gets fatigued of that trend or that style, people can come back and reintroduce cool ideas. And plenty of those ideas have been around this whole time. And I think that's all I'm trying to say with Astro Bot. There is a lot of fatigue with where the AAA space went from 2016 until about 2024. The frustrations are peaking. And then you have Asobi sliding in a fantastic, great family platformer. And it really doesn't do anything revolutionary. It just does the core staples of that genre so well. It uses the PlayStation 5 controller perfectly. And it's just a darn fun, good game. And it's the perfect remedy at the moment where we're all sick and tired of what we've been getting.
Yes. And that's been our monthly Astro Bot segment. This
tune in next week.
Astro Bot.
Well, it's hard because, all right, I'm only interested in talking about Horizon right now because you and I, if I am lucky, I've got a schedule, all right? I'm trying to finish a bunch of games before the Switch 2 gets here, and I am way off my schedule. My schedule states if I can play an hour a day of Horizon, I will be done in a few weeks. But plenty of these days I get home from work and then it's errands and the usual stuff, and before I know it, it's bedtime already, and I'm making the choice more often than not to prioritize sleep and going to bed at my normal time rather than staying up an hour later to play. So there's been many, many days where I just don't miss or I don't play the game.
Right.
And that creates a lot more fun when I actually do get the hour to play the game. So for Horizon, I'm 20 hours into that experience. I still probably have another 15 hours to go, I think. Oh my gosh, Epos. It's so good. It is so good. It is visually one of the best games ever. You know what? Why don't we talk about this too? I got to see the PlayStation 5 on an OLED TV for the very first time this last week. And
did the angels call down the light beams from the ceiling and just
It's like a gigantic iPhone. And I didn't realize what I was missing. I would say I've always invested in super cheap TVs, and as a result of that, I have now used 2 broken TVs for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm kind of done with the budget panels, and I think I've just gotten unlucky. One of the little TCL panels I got, again, saved up. It's Black Friday. I was so excited. I was using a hand-me-down TV from my parents that broke few weeks before Black Friday, and we buy this little TCL panel, and days after the 1-year warranty expired, one of the LED little covers behind the panel like literally fell off, and so there's a bright white spot on the TV at all times.
Jesus.
Right in the middle of the screen, and it was devastating. I called support and I was like, please. It was 1 week after the warranty expired, and they're like, nah, pound sand, loser, enjoy it. So
crazy.
That's been the TV experience for like the last 3 years. So with OLEDs, you explain this to me, and I'm going to do my best to share it back. LED and LCD panels, you always have a backlight. So even if you are trying to display a black pixel or a really dark color pixel, you still have light coming through it. So it's not actually true black. With an OLED, right, it's an electric current going through an organic material. So it can, without a backlight, turn off the pixel in the sector that is a dark color, and it is actually black. It's an actual dark tone. So the colors and the contrast experience is night and day. It is ridiculous, the difference. Is that correct, what I said?
Yeah, that's more or less the gist of it. You get a lot of benefits. Like you said, colors feel a lot more accurate because you're just turning them on. Effectively, like you mentioned, with an LCD or LED backlit panel. You have a light. In the early days, it was literally just like an LED strip around the edge of the panel that shined inwards. You started to get more zones of them in later TVs, but you effectively have an LCD display that controls the color. The liquid crystals literally like tweak to show the color, and then you have a light shining through the back to show the brightness. And so you got colors that blend together, you got smearing, and you got when you try to like have like a white square in the middle of a black frame, you have a lot of glow and bloom from it obviously not being able to just dim that exact space.
Yeah.
And with OLED, you have individual pixels basically that turn on and off and change into the right color. So you get a lot more direct color representation, and black is literally black. The entire screen is off. And so you get this insane contrast ratio for HDR, which actually makes HDR worth using. If you've ever been someone that thinks HDR is pointless, like I did for years, on OLED, it is the way to go. And then you get just mind-blowing colors. They're not always accurate. You can have the same, TV store effect where like they're overcranked or whatever, but it blows your mind wherever it's at. And it just... There's another advantage for gaming that I will mention after. I want to hear more of your impressions first, because I've been using OLED for a few years now, and you are new to this, and it's always so satisfying to see.
Well, I will tell you, you landed on something spot on. For the last few years, let's take The Mandalorian, for example. It is irritating, that HDR content, when you're on a bad panel, right? Yes. And I was on cheap budget panels. And so shows like The Mandalorian just were too dark. And it was really frustrating. And anything you would watch on like those modern, I just felt like every modern show that was shot with HDR in mind was too dark and looked gray and miserable, right? It just looked really sad. And now watching, like the first thing I put on the TV was Avengers 2, because I knew it had like the surround sound thingy. I knew it was going to have super solid color. And it was mind blowing. And also this TV 2, my experience with TVs have always been built-in speakers are garbage, which I still think is probably the norm for most things. But the TV has this 3D sound tech similar to like the PlayStation headphones. And I don't even know how it's doing this on a TV where you don't have like 5.1 surround. I, again, grew up in the era when I was a kid. I remember getting a woofer and hanging speakers behind the TV. And it was like, whoa, I'm in the theater. And it's pretty cool. This TV kind of does this 3D audio effect. And so Thor would throw his hammer and it would go from the left to the right of the screen, and it sounded like that. And so I will say it is really nice, and it feels like it unlocks all of the modern TV content that is HDR to finally be enjoyable, rather than me like trying to slam the backlight up higher and higher on my old cheap panel to try and make out what's going on in a dimly lit scene. Horizon is the only game I've played on it. I'm excited to see Astro Bot, but I will say, I think Horizon Forbidden West is visually the most impressive game I have played in the last 5 years. I know from a technical standpoint, it's not as impressive probably as a Cyberpunk or whatever, but all of the tech is working in unison for this crazy couch experience, and it is insane. The screenshot that I took, I can maybe leave it in the show notes or whatever. It's a scene where you are in a building. There's a window to the outside. The outside is bright. And in the building, it's got really dark points. It's got some flame lighting up the room. And to see all of it in one shot like that moving, it was the most premium game experience I have ever had. Playing PS5 on this TV, I feel like I'm experiencing the future. And it's probably because I've been living in the past and I'm not an early adopter with most new tech. I have to save a long time for it. But it just cements more and more. I'm really into the couch gaming experience. I get the reasons to go with PC. I totally do. But this feels like every time I boot up the PlayStation 5, I'm getting a movie theater-like experience. I'm going to a theme park. It is wild. All of the tech working together to make what is, like I said, the most polished, jaw-dropping moments I've had in gaming. The Decima engine helps with that. So anyway, what is some of the advantages you love on the gaming side?
Obviously, everything you just said. Like, that is my big thing. I will say that I now own 4 OLED TVs / monitors, not including my Switch OLED. And like, I will not buy another LCD panel, even for other people, unless it's like absolutely necessary, because it is that big of a difference. A lot of it comes down to the color and dynamic range and everything, like you said. A lot of it is also the input latency.
Yes.
LCDs tend to be pretty laggy. OLEDs have a lot faster response times, and it's paired with the fact that they are more premium displays, so they come with faster processors and better scalers, and they have gaming modes that are really, really nice and support variable refresh rate and all that stuff. But the OLED technology, the screen technology itself, is faster to change on and off, because it's a binary, like basically on and off state, versus LCDs, it's literally like a crystal twisting back and forth to change colors and shapes and things. And that inherently adds ghosting and things like that. So you also get better motion clarity. One of the big things that a lot of us super nerds still cling to CRT televisions for, the old tube TVs, is in motion, you can see a lot more detail. Whereas on LCDs and stuff, it starts to get smeary and ghosty and things blur together. So for competitive games or just the overall experience, you get a lot more clarity into the individual frames. And that can help with competitive, or it can just look that much nicer in motion. Obviously, games these days have a lot of motion blur on by default and stuff. And part of that's to kind of mask those older traits.
Yep.
But it looks phenomenal. And so you get to really, like you said, it is a perfect storm of all of these technologies playing together, because pretty much every OLED you buy, unless it's just like a purpose-built monitor, like I have a production monitor that's a color grading monitor, so it doesn't have any gaming tech, but most of them, the TVs and stuff, will have your adaptive sync, your variable refresh rate stuff. It's going to have a higher refresh rate for consoles. It's going to have a gaming mode with lower input latency. So you get all of those things, and then you get to start doing fun stuff like the rethink scaler is really great on an OLED, because you can tell it to take, say, a PlayStation 2 running at 480i, which looks absolutely garbage on any modern TV. You run it through the scaler. It's going to deinterlace it in some way. You get to add scan lines to it, which that higher contrast ratio with the OLED is going to make that look much more like a real CRT. And you get to bump it up to HDR, so you really get that the emulation of that phosphor glow from the CRT peeking through the scan lines. And you start to really emulate how old displays looked in a really good way, while still having a really snappy and responsive gaming experience.
I'm happy we're moving that direction. For me, again, this was like a 5 or 6 year saga. And so I'm done sort of investing in the budget panels when possible, and trying to say maybe it's an extra 2 years of saving. Literally, I've been using the broken TV for 3 years. Okay, this was a long journey, but finally saying, all right, I'd rather bump up to the new tech, because to be honest, most of the LED stuff or the LCD, whatever, like the ones that have the dimming arrays that try and mimic what OLED is doing, they're pretty similar prices depending on the manufacturer and what you go with. And so I do think I would love to see what a Switch OLED looks like. Going back to our comment of Switch 2 being like LCD off the rip, if that's the case, that is a little bit of a bummer. And it makes it to where it's hard for me to want to record games, because my PC setup is on an old LCD monitor. So it's like, I get the back and forth, when I move the PS5 in here to record, it's a very different experience. I will say these are all nice to haves, not must haves. But
not must haves.
Now, if you are looking forward, I can just share my preference moving forward would be OLED if it's an option. That technology is only becoming more and more affordable all the time.
Yes.
And especially with TVs, it's kind of silly. Like the sales that happen literally the whole year, but especially around Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and Christmas, it blows my mind how much you can get a good TV for these days versus I remember going to Best Buy with my parents like 15 years ago and how much TVs were then for like a good, this was like the dawn of, I guess it wasn't the dawn, but it was the early days of like HD and 1080p stuff. And so TVs have become a lot more affordable.
Yeah, and especially if you go back a model or two, like you said, the holiday sales are insane. I still remember. So I have bought a grand total of 4 TVs myself in my life. The first one, I was 16 years old. I had saved up all year leading up to my birthday and then asked only for money for my birthday and bought my first 1080p TV, my first flat screen. And it was like $650.
Wow.
And I kept that TV as my primary TV until about 2017 when I was like, I'm going to start making 4K content, so I want to watch stuff in fancy 4K. I want a 4K TV, and bought some cheap Samsung.
Yeah.
And I remember pulling up one of my videos and being like, yeah, this is pretty cool, but it's not as impressive as I had hoped. And then I had lots of issues with that. And those were the only TVs I had until I bought an OLED. And then I bought an OLED, my first OLED in 2020. I reviewed it on the main channel, and it was just like so game changing. But I still kept it in the studio as the gaming TV. And then eventually it's now my main monitor. And then at some point in 2022, I believe, I got a good sponsorship or something. Was just like I was having issues playing games on the TV in our living room. It was that Samsung, so it was not super great. The apps were crashing it, so like if we had the streaming apps installed, like too many of them, it just like would freeze all the time.
Yeah.
And so we were having all sorts of issues. And I was just like, between that and the size making it harder for me to play from the distance our couch was at, I was like, all right, screw it. I bought like a 51-inch or 50-inch OLED that was the same line, just the newer model as the 48-inch I had. And I've never complained again about watching TV or, playing games in there. And it's just mind-blowing. And it's just like, it's a little more expensive, but given how much I paid for my first flat screen, I'm not too stressed about it.
Yeah. The crashing issue you just described was a regular issue with the cheap panel that I had. I mean, I'd have to restart the TV every session, like every time. And it was like, I even, bought a separate little Roku to be the brain for it. Because it's at that point when you're piecemealing things and you put all the costs together, it's like I should just bought a little bit nicer panel for real.
Right. So cheap stuff. Eventually, like obviously everyone's financial situation is different, and if you are just buying something up front, you can only afford so much. But the cheap stuff you end up buying more frequently and buying things to go with it to help it, and eventually the cost adds up a lot more. But you got to be in the right position for it, and not everyone's there yet. But the screens will also keep getting cheaper. They have been going down every year, and so I can't wait until more people get to experience it, because I think LCDs will basically just die, other than for like offices and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this seems like a good point for our break before we hop into the second half of the show. So we'll see you all again in just a moment. Woo! Welcome back to part 2 of the show. Let's hit on a comment we received this last week from a viewer, Aegis League 4053. Aegis says, could be a future topic for a vid or a brief mention in the podcast. I've been really discouraged by this talk about Halo and Gears of War coming to other consoles. It's honestly making me feel like, if it's true, I should just sell my Series X once I'm done playing everything. Because what's the point in having the console if all the games are going to go elsewhere? PS5 is giving me a good home console experience as of right now. So it's not like I'd be losing out on anything meaningful, but it's still hard to say goodbye after all these years. Is there any real value in sticking with Xbox, or is it time to rip the Band-Aid off and use that money elsewhere? Thank you, Aegis. Well, a comment that I feel like is perfect. You and I have done, honestly, dual comm style videos for years now. And one of the ones that sticks out in my mind is an E3 forever ago. Maybe it was 18, 19, I don't even know, where we talked about the future of Xbox. And it was when Phil Spencer was laying hints of the groundwork of the future, where they were moving in the direction of more publisher, platform agnostic, and play our games anywhere. And here we are in 2025. And I think there's a lot to unpack with this comment. Off the bat, what do you make of it, and what are your thoughts?
So the spicy side of me that has been burned as an Xbox customer in terms of hardware at this point is like, yes, I look forward to playing MCC on PS5, both because the 13-year-old me would just have his mind broken by the idea, but also just because I'm not going to play on Xbox anymore, so it might be neat. But like, grounded in real world, I always get torn on these things. To me, if you're going to buy both consoles, you already knew you were going to have a ton of overlap. Like, you've already spent that money knowing that most of the games you could play were on both. And so, yes, there are going to be a handful that could be on one or the other. and are now coming to both. I'm not sure if you already have the system and presumably a library of games on that system. That is really what you're abandoning, not the box itself, but the games you've already invested in. You have to buy those back. I'm not sure it'd be worth ditching it now. If you only have Halo and Gears, like that's how these exclusivity conversations always come up. Is like, if you only own the like 2 or 3 exclusives, I guess, yeah, sure. Sell off your Xbox Series X and those couple games if you can. Buy the games on the new system and then use that money to buy a bunch more games. But if you're already invested, it's really hard to just switch. Like, I look at it like camera lenses. Like, I am heavily invested in the Canon ecosystem because I've used cameras, not all even Canon, but that used Canon's mounts. And so it is very hard for me to jump to like a Nikon camera because all of my lenses are already here in Canon. And it's way more work and stress and whatever to transition all these little things, the lenses, than just sell my camera body and buy a different brand camera body. Same thing with the consoles. Like, you have a library, you have your achievements, you have whatever. It's a lot harder to just fully jump ship there. But ultimately, like, if you're looking at this from an outsider who is trying to decide which to buy or whatever, it definitely makes the PS5 more interesting or appealing as a system if you could have all of the Xbox games and the PS5 exclusive games.
Yeah. I don't think, unless Xbox does something radical with their next piece of hardware, that I'm going to buy it. I don't see myself buying another hardware Xbox again, since they made the shift to support PC on day one as well.
Yep.
So based on this comment, Aegis, again, where you play and the ecosystem you choose, that's deeply personal. There's so many reasons, and we can only speculate on so much based on what your comment was. And there's a lot of, obviously, salt and heat about console debate topics in general, which I just don't care about, you know?
Yeah.
But if you're looking to invest in what's going to let me play the most amount of games with just the most versatility, and you're still really interested in the Xbox franchises, build a PC is the recommendation that I would go. Like, at least for me personally, because you're going to get all the Xbox games on day one. You're not going to have to wait the time. Let's take the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game. Really looking forward to that title. I have a PC that could play it, but I want to play it on the couch. I don't own a series. Yeah. I'm not going to get a series. So I'm in the waiting room now for whenever that game is going to come to PlayStation. If you... Like, he brings up having the PS5 and enjoying it, which is great, but Sony takes a lot longer right now for their titles to come to PC. It does seem like they're pretty much all coming to PC for the most part, but you're waiting 6 months to a year for it. You know, Rebirth is just now hitting the PC for the first time. If you fast forward the clocks in 3 or 4 years, it makes sense why Xbox is going the route that they are. Look at the sales charts. PlayStation 5 has double the sales that the Series does at this point. Xbox hasn't had that dominant position that it did previously with older generations. And I think they've made some missteps. I have a hard time really feeling motivated to continue in their ecosystem. I believe they've made the experience worse. During the 360 era, I was 360 all the way. I thought that multiplayer ecosystem was phenomenal. The party system, the games that they were launching, it was fantastic. But from the VCR onwards, I've just been a little bit confused with their strategy. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate the fact that those games are coming day one to PC. I think that is awesome. But also, why do you buy a console? If you're buying it purely to be like, well, I only want exclusives coming to this platform and only people on my ecosystem to play, that's where I think it can get a little iffy for me, because Halo or Gears going to multiple platforms only benefits the player. You've got a larger player base, a bigger community, more support. The Halo player base getting, you know, the rumor is MCC's coming to Sony, and that's been the rumor for a long time. That would be great. That's a whole influx of new users for that game and that ecosystem. That's the world we live in for multiplayer titles. The more people that play it, generally the better it is for the state of the game and the scene. So why? Why do you own the console is really the question to ask. And if you feel like it's time to say goodbye, I totally understand it, but it's a deeply personal choice what ecosystem you want to invest in moving forward.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have a core attachment to Halo and Xbox because it was kind of the thing that sent Xbox where it was. It's interesting for me because I was also all Xbox 360 for the first few years of that era with Halo 3 and everything. But my first Halo was on PC. I played Custom Edition and Combat Evolved, the Gearbox port, on PC first. To me, it's just a game. Like, I obviously I cannot fully detach it from that Xbox association, but I don't see any offense to playing it on a PlayStation. And like you said, more players for any multiplayer title is always good. More people getting to and experience a game is good. I find the MCC rumor like almost impossible to believe, specifically because the game has had less than life support for the past couple years. So the idea that there's a team porting it to PS5, and the rumor also included Switch, which doesn't make sense to me, but porting it to another system and then also supporting it there when support has basically been dropped on the platforms it's on now, just, I don't see it. But if it's there, like you said, it's deeply personal whether you can separate that for yourself or not. I think a lot of people are just going to be like, it's a game, I'm going to play it. Great for the people who have come up with Xbox from, the first Xbox to 360 to Xbox One, whatever, with Halo each time. They're going to feel something, and that's okay. I am so curious at this point what the 4D chess plan here is for Xbox. For a while, like, I was really convinced Xbox had the kind of plan here because, yes, you could play your games on the PS5, but you could get an Xbox Series S for way cheaper than a PS5. And I see lots of setups on Reddit and like from kids and stuff where they have the S because that's all they can afford, and it works for them and it's fine. And PlayStation does not have a budget option. But also they do, because you can get a PS4 Pro for a lot cheaper, and most of the games run there.
Yeah. We're in a disruption phase where they're still releasing games day one on PS4 and PS5. I mentioned Forbidden West. It's silly that you can play Horizon Forbidden West on PS4. Like, that game technically is insane on the PS5. And yeah, it's really pared down to support a console that came out, 2013 was PS4? Yeah. But I do like this universe. It's more like the PC architecture where we're all building, x86 style games, right? You could pare down the performance options, turn everything to low, and somebody who is younger or on a budget, like, I would be thrilled if I had a Series S and I was younger, because the library of games you have access to, the homebrew potential with that box is super cool. So Microsoft is so big, Xbox has to just be this laughable division, right? It doesn't make up a substantial portion of their portfolio, I don't believe. And I'm with you. I don't know where their strategy is going. We heard rumors that there's more Xbox division layoffs coming. Yeah. Just a bummer. Jumping back to the Halo MCC thing, I also think it's silly, but if you look just purely at Steam charts, there's more people playing Halo MCC, almost double the amount of players playing MCC each day than there are playing Halo Infinite. That's Halo true. Infinite is like about, on PC, here's the disclaimer, because I know every time this gets brought up, the pitchfork goes in the air from the one person who's like, there's more people who play on Xbox, it's not the total picture. Yep, right. Got it, get it, cool. PC Halo, it's about 6K playing a day. Your peak concurrent number, a day on MCC. With Infinite, it's around 3K. Right. So if they were to invest some side dollars into porting it somewhere else, MCC makes more sense to me.
Yeah, and as much of a cluster as the MCC's 12 different game engines were, porting it to a platform that is ultimately very similar, which the PS5 is, it's probably easier to take that game and just tweak it for the similar platform than the scope of Halo Infinite's new engine and everything. And maybe that's not true, because again, it is a mess of a bajillion different game engines and whatever. But I feel like, in a way, doing that for Xbox and PC, that work has already been done, whereas Infinite just has so many things that need a lot more QA. Like Infinite, or MCC has already, it's been out for 10 years. It has kind of a lot of that QA and like finding all the little quirks that need fixed up done for it, that Infinite hasn't just had the raw time for. So I feel like theoretically it could be an easier port. Or it could just be that rumored CE remake that everyone kept talking about. Like, maybe that's what's on PlayStation. I don't know. I'm going to play it on PlayStation just for the novelty of it. But, yeah.
There's so much heated thoughts about the console stuff that it's just not even fun to really throw the hat in the ring on the conversation.
Yeah.
We have more choice now than ever to play where we want and how we want. And you get to pick and choose. Where are your friends at? What kind of games do you like playing? And what sort of investment do you want to make for the next 10 years? I think a PC is a very compelling option if you're really invested in day one Xbox exclusive games. Because I think the PC and the Xbox One day one thing will continue, and then you're still going to have a lag between that and the Sony ecosystem. If you're down to wait, like I am, great. It's hard to say anything else. So good question, though. And I would extend it to the viewers and the listeners of this show. What do you think about the future for Xbox? Wasn't the rumor EPOS at CES we were going to see something Xbox rumored or whatever?
Yeah, they were supposed to be partnering with Lenovo or something, and everyone was like, "Oh, so it's a handheld or whatever." And so far, we've gotten nothing. So I'm curious what that is, because that seemed like people were certain, like they had the company down, that like the booth it was going to be at. So I don't really know what's going on there, because Phil Spencer and like the Xbox messaging itself has like mentioned that they are coming with a thing. So it's not even just speculation that they're doing it. Like they are overtly doing a thing. I'm not quite sure. Maybe they wanted to wait till after Switch announcements. I don't know.
Yeah, that could make a lot of sense. Or just wait for the summer, whatever show. Speaking of PlayStation, we got the new list of PlayStation Plus free games, and January is ridiculous, dude.
Yes.
You can all thank me for purchasing God of War Ragnarok about a week before it's coming to PS Plus, because here it is. It is free if you have their Plus Essential tier, their lowest tier of things. So that is great. I'm happy I own it. I'm not a huge... Well, I do like the Plus style where you select download the game and you have access to it anytime you have your base subscription live. I do think that is a nice system, but I still believe in physical ownership and I enjoy having the disc. So anyway, what other games are on this massive month?
We've got Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. It's a Yakuza game which has a early 2000s emo band title in terms of length. It's crazy action adventure beat 'em up style game. The Yakuza games are just like completely unhinged, and they are a lot of fun. Kind of like Saints Row, where like you just have this, you go through and shoot people and beat them up, and it's just completely bonkers. Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. Then there's Atlas Fallen, which I think is one of those games. I feel like we need to do a dedicated episode about how often or how easy it is to overlook games that aren't AAA or quadruple A, because this game looks like a classic God of War game.
Does it really?
2023.
What?
It is.
Okay, I'm looking at the Steam trailer now.
Mythos RPG. It's got that classic face button combat. Like, I am so stoked to play this game, and I've never heard of it before today.
And it's very positive, by the way, on recent Steam reviews.
Yeah.
This like, looks sweet.
Visually, it looks beautiful. This is what I love about the PlayStation Plus or any of these kind of games things, is discovering games that you want to stick with. Like a game like Ragnarok, I'm going to buy. I am far more likely to play a big game when I have it in my hand than if it's like I have all of the big games because I got the PS Plus Founders Pack when I got my PS5. So I've got all the Uncharted's and whatever, and I've yet to play any of them because they're not on my shelf. They're not in front of me. They're in an infinite list like we've talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm far more likely to play through God of War and Ragnarok when I have it physically. I will download it from this, and it'll make it easier once I buy it to just load it off the SSD or whatever. But I was going to buy it anyway. But these little games that I've never even really heard of or not given the proper attention, getting them for free and being teased into playing them, I've discovered so many games that really stick with me that way. And this looks like one that we've been asking for, didn't know really existed, and I'm so stoked to download this to my PS5 in a couple days and play it.
Well, that brings up another reason I've liked the PS5 so much, is because I will actually just go like noodle around on the store, or I'll go look in the PlayStation Plus, whatever their middle category is, not premium, but not so premium, whatever it is, because I'll just watch a trailer and look at screenshots for games. And this Atlas Fallen game is one I was looking forward to when I go to, say add to library, look at this trailer. Mm-hmm. And I've installed and tried a bunch of games. That's why I tried the Plucky Squire. That's why I tried Resogun. Like, they're really fun, and I would have never, ever cared if I just saw it on a YouTube video or something. I would have blown it off. There is something, it reminds me, demo desk culture is gone, and it stinks that like it is so buried. Yes, you can find demos for a lot of games. Most of the big ones don't even bother. But I used to look forward to every month getting that official PlayStation magazine so it could throw the disc in, and I would try pretty much everything. And it was so much more effective to try than just look at some gameplay. And this, to me, I would have never tried Atlas Fallen or even cared unless, it came up in a situation like this. Speaking of which, SD Gundam Battle Alliance is the next game. This is another Gundam game. It's the little tiny versions, the cute miniature ones. I know there's an anime on this. I watched
it a bunch back in the day.
Was it good?
It was all right. It had more of that like Digimon kind of thing, because the mechs themselves kind of have this personality versus it being fully about the riders.
Yeah.
And so,
it's an ARPG. You can play through the game solo or up to 2 other players in your little squad. I like Gundam a lot. I'm not going to probably play this game. During COVID, my pandemic activity was building Gunpla, which is their little model kits. And that was a ton of fun and got me sucked into watching some of the animes. But yeah, cool that it's here. What is next?
Sayonara Wild Hearts. So I'm just going to read you the verbatim description because to me it sells me on anything. A dreamy arcade game about riding motorcycles, skateboarding, dance battling, shooting lasers, wielding swords, and breaking hearts at 200 miles per hour. What a pitch.
Okay, what? Again, I just pulled it up on Steam. Overwhelmingly positive.
Yes.
This game came out in 2019.
Super stylistic.
Looks sick. This looks fantastic.
This is a game I've definitely heard of in passing, but never, I couldn't have told you what it was about before looking into it. And again, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go play this game now.
These are the games that I love to put the footage of in the show. These are like the gameplay focused games that are super unique and remind you like, man, this medium is so rad and it's so much more than just quadruple and AAA.
Yeah, like you have to see it to realize like, wow, this is different. Like word descriptions don't always do it.
Yep. Next up, Anno Mutationem. Anno Mutationem? What's the description on this one, dude?
It's a cyberpunk 2D/3D because it's like pixel art, but it's also in this 3D world kind of fusion. It kind of looks like a Metroidvania kind of deal, like a hack and slash side-scrolling kind of deal, but it's got 3D elements to it as well. I've heard some good things about it. It hasn't really like blown people's mind, but as someone who loves cyberpunk settings, it's probably going to be a little bit of fun.
It's another very positive over on Steam.
Like these are all big wins. The only one that I think might not be a big win is the Gundam game because those are always kind of middling in terms of reception.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, like they're all just big. They're not heavy hitting games in terms of like AAA whatever, but like well received games. And then of course the last of the normal tier is Orcs Must Die 3, which I've not played 3 specifically, but I played a bunch of the first 2, and it's just classic tower defense third-person shooter kind of game where you really, like, you build the traps and the arrows and the whatever. It introduced me to tower defense back in the game. I had played, obviously, like Warcraft and whatever, but for a more over-the-shoulder kind of tower defense, like, this game was so much fun back in the day, and I've never played 3, so I'm going to give it a go.
I would like to as well, but there's still 2 more on the list actually because I'm on the blog itself. Citizen Sleeper, another very positive game on Steam. A TTRPG. Is that a turn-based tactical RPG?
Yes.
Yeah. This looks sick as well. What is this month? Another futuristic role-playing in the ruins of an interplanetary capitalistic society, blah, blah, blah. So, Rage Against the Machine.
Poker Club.
Poker Club, there we go.
4K poker with ray tracing. Ray tracing poker.
Are you serious?
Yes.
All right, this one is a mixed over on Steam. It's
welcome to Poker Club. Live the life of a poker pro in the most immersive poker simulation ever seen with Ultra HD 4K visuals and breathtaking ray tracing.
Oh, wow. They have like real character models here. It honestly looks like the finals. If you look at the trailer, the like casino, the little coins, it looks like the characters from the finals.
It does. That's weird.
Yeah. I'm guessing you would just say if you're interested in poker, go play Balatro, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the 2 games that are coming to the premium tier, which is their highest end subscription thing, Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings, which is apparently a PlayStation 2 Indiana Jones, right? It's not the Great Circle.
A PlayStation 2 Indiana Jones from 2009.
That's
right.
That's late,
right? I had a PS3 in 2009, or at least 2010. Like, I was way past.
How did this game review? Let's see here. Ooh, 5 out of 10 on IGN back in the day. I don't think I've ever seen an IGN below 6 in years.
It is a weird pick, and we totally did not think somehow they squeezed the new Indiana Jones on this on accident when we saw that. But
I think there's a DS version of the same game. This was the era, I believe. Oh my gosh. Don't you love back in the day when they would make like a Game Boy version of like a Call of Duty game or something?
My favorite kind of video to watch right now is people who will do like 4-hour deep dives comparing like the PS2, the Xbox, the Wii version of games, and showing how they all had the same name and were pitched as the same game, but often they were completely different games.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I remember this. I would buy games on the Game Boy. Yeah. And it would be a top-down version of what was a 3D like action RPG on the PlayStation 1 or something ridiculous.
Yeah. Visually, this game looks horrible because you can tell something about a lot of 3D games in the transition from PS2 to Wii. Like something about the Wii, like the rendering stuff they did just made the games look awful. And so visually it looks terrible. I'm sure it's fine. Like it's definitely going for that Tomb Raider-y kind of Indiana Jones play, which I think could be fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can pick it up for free, so you're not paying anything for it. But I personally, I'm just going to get the Tomb Raider remastered set.
Yeah, that seems wise. The other game, though, however, Medieval 2, this is a PlayStation classic. Yes. If you don't recognize this character, you probably didn't see promo videos for PlayStation back in the day. And apparently this new and improved version featuring up rendering, that's what they call it here in the official copy, up rendering EPOS, rewind, quick save, and custom video filters. You'll have to challenge the powers of darkness and untold magic as Sir Daniel returns from the grave to thwart an evil sorcerer's plan. Man, all that up rendering is really making it look great, dude.
Yeah, I need to... I want to look up what they mean by this.
Up rendering.
I want a Digital Foundry deep dive into what the heck up rendering means, because...
Yeah, what's up, dog?
Yeah, right. Like, what?
It's the up dog of upscaling.
Like, I'm looking it up. Somebody There's not a mention of it anywhere. Forever. Like, I am so confused. But
do you know much about the emulation quality of PlayStation 2 games on PS5? I am playing Legend of Dragoon on PlayStation 5.
How are you liking that?
I'm liking it, but I have a feeling that if I were to throw the disc into my PlayStation 2 with that lovely FrameMeister you sent me, I'm going to notice a lot of differences. There's hitches and things that I don't believe were there. Visually, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty... I mean, actually, if you go to my latest video, you can see it. I feel like it does a decent job of bumping things up, but it's also a turn-based RPG where input latency isn't going to be that noticeable.
Right.
And I will say the actual menu feels like turd, but I'm trying to remember if the original, it felt like turd as well. So I don't know. I know the company who's been doing a bunch of these things. I read a big article about it, but anyway, keep going. Sorry.
I have primarily played Tekken and something else on there. And originally when it first released, there was a lot of complaints about the emulation quality. I know after DF made a video on it, they did go back and add some stuff to like tweak it up. I still don't think it's as good as a scaler.
Yeah.
But even looking at your footage, this is what bugs me and separates me from a lot of people. I know everyone's divided on this. I'm looking at your footage from Dragoon right now. I can tell the way the 3D models are rendered that it's emulator ups, like
yes, there's holes. There's so many holes in the models that I can see where their head detaches from their body, and I don't think that was present in the original. But part of the reason I'm like sticking with it, it's got the trophy support, which I
Right.
think is kind of cool. I'm not into achievement stuff, but I wanted to see what it's like.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
probably compelling for a lot of people. I am someone who would prefer the much more messy, pixelated PS1 output that masks, like, every time your character moves, all the armor pieces are glitching out and stuff. Like, some of that would have been there, but you wouldn't have seen it at 240p on an old TV. And so I am someone who would prefer just the native res and not trying to pretend the 3D models are bigger than they are. But I know a lot of people don't care. I know for PS2 games, it's a lot better because PS2 is natively rendering a little bit higher. Tekken ends up looking all right, especially with a couple of the like scanline filters or whatever. It's not amazing, but it's also one of those things of like, if you just want to play it on console, it's a fine way to go.
the company is called Implicit Conversions. Their tech is called Syrup. They've done 11,000 games for PlayStation, 6,000 for Xbox, 3,000 for Nintendo. This is the studio.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Our emulators use a combination of high-level emulation and low-level emulation techniques. That means some device components, graphical effects, or even game functions are replaced with modern versions. The goal of this is to retain the emulation quality while allowing for modern enhancements and functionality. And you don't even need source code with these guys. This is what they specialize with. So Sony will contract them, and they'll throw in the trophy support. And it's pretty cool. Their site has the roadmap. This is where the whole conversation of the PS3 emulation came into being. It's a Trello board, basically. And in there dreaming about stage, researching and prototyping the possibility of a PS3 emulator package for Syrup. So it's not bad, but I watched a review video for Legend of Dragoon 1, and dude, it looks so much better on this person who was clearly playing it on a PS2. So I don't know. It's weird. That's why I was curious on PS2 if it's decent.
Yeah, it looks pretty solid. It's hard because these packages are clearly made for normal people who aren't emulator enthusiasts, because those people are already playing wherever they want. And there's always that weird part of the discourse of people who were never really going to switch to playing on console versus PCSX2 or whatever. Like, obviously different priorities, but also there are a lot of cool things that modern community emulators do for games that I feel like would be trivial for the studio that does this professionally to implement. And it's weird to see it not done, like certain shaders or like better scaling effects or whatever. And we've seen over the past 10 or 15 years a massive improvement. If you've ever picked up those old game collections of like, here's our NES collection for the Xbox or something weird, like the scaling is super blurry. They apply these weird filters to everything and whatever. Like, clearly we've come a long way.
Yeah.
But I feel like it takes little to look at what the popular emulator is doing and be like, we can do that too, more directly on hardware, or like add in the crazy AI upscaling filter that does it without breaking the models, or ray tracing or something goofy. Like, add a value to it, because for a lot of normal people, that you got to do something to convince them to buy the game. Otherwise they're like, why would I play old game? And I hate that mentality, and we want to combat against it. But also, if you're you can throw something in. And trophies are cool, but like some DualSense integration, something.
Yeah. I think for most it's convenience, and it plays off nostalgia. And I think the Implicit Conversion team did a pretty good job so far. But since we are like further down the rabbit hole, I just was thinking about it this week, and the sad thing is you can't really find a Digital Foundry breakdown for Legend of Dragoon. When it first came out on PS5, it was just a disaster. They fixed it with some updates, but like, what does that mean? It's hard to find a section of the internet where the people with the understanding of upscaling and emulation can really weigh in on it. And yeah, these are the types of games too where Legend of Dragoon should have a re-release 100%. Give us the fast forward feature, improve load times, do all of those elements that make it a better experience. It's also a game that I'm hoping gets a Sony treatment, not a 3-part Final Fantasy VII upgrade, but it would be cool to see a more modernized version of it. So
yeah,
speaking
I want that and a new siphon filter.
Yes. Why did they just... Anyway, we don't need to go down there.
Did you know Days Gone was in the siphon filter universe?
I did. I
had no idea. What is the point of that?
What is the point of the 2 games that Sony just canceled? Speaking of Bend Studio, why don't we jump a little bit further down the road? Actually, you know what? I want to pause it because the last two topics float perfectly together. Before we get there, we have to do another, dual comp Baldur's Gate 3 story, because it wouldn't be the dual comp podcast without Astro Bot or Baldur's Gate 3. So what have modders done now?
Modders have figured out how to add entire custom cutscenes and entire custom companions to the game, which means virtually, like, you can make an entire new campaign in the game now. Like, that is that level of, like, once they break through that door, literally anything is possible. We've seen it with Skyrim, where they turn it into other games. We've already hit that point with Baldur's Gate, and even the devs are like, I don't know how they figured that out. Okay, awesome. Like, the devs did not give them modding tools for this. They just figured it out.
Oh, wow.
And that is incredible. And we're going to see very little of it up front, because if you're going to do a whole custom companion, you got to model it, you got to plan it, figure out what you're doing, get voice lines, whatever. But that means we can see entire custom campaigns in this game. We can see entire custom side stories with characters. You could have Master Chief running around Faerun and being like, what are you going to do to the Mind Flayer? Sir, finish this fight.
Yeah, like, the 10-year game that was Baldur's Gate 3, which was already going to be one of those Mount Everest PC games, or it's available on console as well, but one of these Mount Everest PC games that lasts absolutely forever. It's now a 25-year game, because the people who love D&D, who love this universe and this tech, you're going to see Fallout London-style campaigns in here, which is so incredibly exciting. And just these are the types of community efforts I love to see, and especially when developers build an entire foundation and ecosystem, it feels endless. This is part of what drew me so heavily towards Halo in the early days. When it first got forged and then refined it really did seem like Halo was in a league of its own. You could build your own games within Halo for what seemed like forever. Now it's very rudimentary in contrast with like these kind of things, but how cool is this?
Yes. And it's funny you mentioned that, because for me, it goes back to Halo CE. Like, we had custom map levels where you like fought zombie armies in a city or whatever in Halo 1 on PC way before that, because they actually had official modding tools, and you had custom scripting. You could play as a hunter. You could do anything. Like, it's so hard. And this is, I think, and obviously it's hard to connect these conversations together when we only talk about them separately, but we get accused a lot of being like too cynical about modern games, because there are certain things, like when we're told that this new entry of the franchise is going to be a 10-year game, and we roll our eyes and we're like, that's not how it works.
Yes.
Because you cannot force it. In order to make a 10-year or 20-year game, you just need to make an amazing game, support it well, and then give the community a little bit of freedom. It needs a little bit of a sandbox. And we've seen this on repeat. Halo, Minecraft, Skyrim, Stardew Valley, Fallout, any Bethesda game, I guess. In some ways, Mass Effect, and now Baldur's Gate. Like, any game where you have a big enough sandbox that people love the game enough and they want to jump in and make more of it, it's going to sell more copies and keep the game relevant for so long that, especially in Skyrim's case, you can just keep reselling us the game for 10 more years.
I didn't even realize that, like, I was looking up on the break, the PlayStation VR. You can play Skyrim in VR on PS4. Yeah, it probably looked awful, but that sounds freaking awesome.
Yeah. Like, it feels so easy. Obviously, to deliver a game of Skyrim or Mass Effect or Baldur's Gate's caliber takes time and work, but not as much time and work that goes into most AAA games, mind you. But, like, it seems so easy to get a formula that can deliver this kind of experience that I do not understand why billions of dollars are being shuffled towards games where they want to force it to be a 10-year game and it just doesn't work. Like, why not? It seems like so much more of a gamble to rush it and force it than to just do it the right way.
It's because the money's huge. I'm trying to pick it up here. Video game industry is a $200+ billion global industry. That was last year. It is much larger than that of cinema and Hollywood. And so the 10-year game is a result of a bunch of suits from other industries who aren't as passionate about gaming, who come from the world of just money and C-suite like life. When they say 10-year game, I hear a 10-year monetization scheme.
Yeah.
Right? They're not saying we're creating such a good game that it will last 10 years. We are committed to making a game that services the vision of a 10-year monetization like system, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why they're just failing left, right, and center. You know, you put down a bunch of great games here: Skyrim, Minecraft, Terraria, Stardew Valley, Fallout, Mass Effect, Baldur's Gate 3. The list goes on. And the point is, it's a good game at its core, and it lets the community just soar. And what you just said is basically paraphrased what the Larian had talked about in his speech before the Game of the Year award in December, which is make a good game. That's the trick. Just make a good game and respect your community.
Yes. I'm a big goal of mine for this new year, for 2025, is to not get locked into my gut reactions to things and to find a way to make it more productive. Mm-hmm. We've spent the past year or two talking about how all these publishers and developers are doing all these missteps and not listening to the obvious answers. I think the next step for everyone that's like, well, voting with your wallet doesn't work, whatever. It can, but I think the next step is to accept, based on what you just said, like there are a lot of outside people coming into the games industry, and there's a lot of varied people in the gaming industry, to just accept that different companies, publishers, executives are going to do things different ways. Like, yes, there is an obvious formula to success here that is obvious to us, but maybe not obvious to someone who isn't knee deep in this.
Yep.
There are going to be people who do things different ways, and they're going to royally mess up. And all we can do is ignore them, embrace the ones that do it right, and continue to move with them if they end up shuffling around because they get shut down or whatever. But like, all we can do is move with that, and the momentum does flow. It doesn't work overnight. Like, I think one of the biggest lessons from Concord is not live service bad, not 8-year dev cycle bad, although that's part of it and will tie into my point. Not chasing trends is inherently bad. But that you cannot have an immediate reaction on an industry that takes so long to produce things now. Concord probably should have been stopped 3 or so years ago, but the game was already so far in that you can't really do that. And so when you say vote with your wallet and people get really discouraged because it seems to have no effect on the next Call of Duty that's already been in development for 3 years and was coming out whether you bought it or not, you got to realize that these trends take 5 years or more to really set into stone. We're going to see in 2028 3 new Baldur's Gate clones come out all in the same season, and 6 new Astro Bot knockoffs coming out all in the same season. But no amount of support of a Baldur's Gate or an Astro Bot or whatever will produce more of it for the next year, because those games have already long been made.
You sent me the article of the court filing that revealed Black Ops Cold War had a budget of $700 million.
Yeah.
Now, it's from the court filing. It's a Call of Duty game between 2015 and 2020, so I think the presumption is it's right. Cold War. But I made a note to you. I'm like, are we going to see $1 trillion budget game? Because that is insanity. That is crazy. I love what you mentioned about the cynicism. It dominates our society. It always is the top of the For You page. It gets the most engagement, but it doesn't make you feel that good. I made a video this last week about games that like had an impact on my life, and Fallout 4 was one of them. I've shared the story a bunch. But if I were to just talk on paper about Fallout 4 and its reception, there's a lot of the community who hates that game's guts, in contrast with Fallout 3 and New Vegas. They'll scream at you till you're blue in the face, telling you how bad the story is, the RPG mechanics are light, this is such a middling version of the series. And if I would have listened to all of those reviews and whatnot, I probably wouldn't have played the game last year and had a huge revelation, a big change in the way that I viewed games and my interest in how I spend my time in single-player titles. But here's the thing. Last year, I was at a point in time where Fallout 4 hit just right. It hit all the right notes, delivered everything that I was looking for in that moment. It doesn't mean it's objectively like this perfect game, and I do agree with a lot of the sentiments people share about the story and all those things. But if you are continually letting knee-jerk reactions and reception to the cynicism that dominates all of the just media we consume right now, you are missing out on experiences that could change your life. And so while it is such a tired, beaten dead horse. The modern games industry is doing so many irritating, frustrating, silly practices. I have never been more stoked on games in my life. There is so much cool stuff, more than you could ever consume in a lifetime. So where do you want to put your attention and your focus? I'm with you. I don't know how you stop a powerhouse like Call of Duty. Spending $700 million means that they are making that and then way more, okay?
Right.
And it will go until it doesn't work any longer. But no, those franchises probably aren't for us anymore, right? And the only way I can vote, like you said, is with my wallet. But I'm not going to live in the negative headspace. I don't care. It goes back to looking at the trailers for these games on PS Plus Premium. I don't need to look at an article about it. I want to look at a quick clip and install it and try it myself. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is a revelation that I've had in the past couple months, actually. We talk a lot about this, about not listening to negative discourse, trying things for yourself. I realized I was still susceptible to this, even if I didn't buy into what people said. I have two examples of this. One of them is going to be a little more controversial, but I am medium on both. The first is I finally picked up over the holiday Helldivers and played it. And I am in love with it. It is an absolute blast. And in my transition away from competitive multiplayer gaming last year, I wish I would have just played this instead of a Halo or a Call of Duty or whatever I picked up in the moment to get my in and out fix, because it's PvE, it lacks that competitive toxicity stuff, and it is an absolute blast. And I wish I had been playing it all year. I didn't not get it because of the Sony account issues or because of whatever specific complaint someone might have had about the game. I didn't end up getting it because it got deprioritized in my head because of just all of the general controversy and awful discourse around it, because it just soured the image of the game in my head that much that it just never became a priority to pick up, even when it was on sale. It's not that I chose not to buy it. I just kind of didn't buy it because everything around it was so gross. And then I had the same realization again this past week. I watched the movie The Marvels. We were talking about superhero burnout. The Marvels is one of those like absolute low point for the franchise because in many ways of burnout and some other factors. And I agree with some of the criticisms of the movie. At the same time, despite agreeing with a lot of the criticisms of the movie, it is arguably some of the most fun I've had with a superhero movie in a long time. It is right up there with Deadpool and Wolverine for me. Not in terms of quality of movie, but in terms of how much fun I had watching it with my wife, laughing at the jokes, taking it in, whatever. And again, I waited nearly 2 years to watch it because everyone talking about it, even though I was a defender of it and the people in it, it was hard to choose to sit and do it because that association had already been made in my head. And so I think it is super important to separate yourself from the discourse, not just in terms of being convinced about things that you haven't figured out for yourself, but just being exposed to it at all sours things.
Yeah. I laugh. I went to college for film, right? Yeah. And I was exposed heavily to like film criticism. And there are so many incredible movies over the last 100 years that are voted like the top best of all time that I despise, and vice versa. Movies that should just be like, everybody hates them, that I find value and I think they're cool in. I don't even want to list specific examples because it's so toxic, all of the discussion. If you like some modern movie that the like crew of we hate this because of XYZ is going to fight you on, it's not even fun. I don't even care.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And so I am so much happier just trying to experience things for myself and make the decision, because there's so many competing voices or voices and forces about all of this stuff. And yeah, the Helldivers 2 account pairing thing was messy, but it kept you from playing what is such a freaking awesome game. And I would love to play it with you anytime. And there's so many moments where you are probably missing out on something because of a content creator's reaction that doesn't even represent what your unique traits are. We are all one of a kind. And the stuff that resonates with us and what we see out of a film or out of a game is completely unique to us. That is what is so cool about this. We may go in and watch Jurassic Park and you're going to take things away from it that I'm not going to see, and vice versa. It's going to resonate on different notes with me because of my experiences. So I hope that level of awareness spreads because there's a lot of joy once you get past this brick wall of hot takes and quick streamer clips of berating a game for something that typically doesn't impact you. I'm not saying there isn't opportunities to vote with your wallet when there's a policy or something that you think is just bad for the majority of people. And that's why I don't want to like lean too heavily on the Helldivers thing, because I know there's a lot of subtext that I don't understand. But in general, don't let streamer clips dictate what you like and what you don't like. That's silly.
Yeah. And if there's a thing or two that is disliked about a game, that doesn't mean you won't like the rest of it and that it's not still worth playing.
Yep. We're always looking for this affirmation from the larger hive mind, and that is silly because the internet is dumb. It's just dumb. I love this invention, but we clearly have left that Wild West phase and are now going through the growing pains phase. In that video, when I was talking about my experience of games that changed my life, Legend of Dragoon was one of them. And I remembered when I beat a game as a kid, I had nobody to talk about it with. Maybe there was a friend or two who also gamed, but no one until like high school played JRPGs or cared. I played it because I liked it. I couldn't tweet about it. I couldn't write a review. I couldn't do anything. I just played it and experienced it because it meant something to me. And that is an important skill that we lose if every hobby, activity, and interest we do, we're continually looking for affirmation from this hive mind on the internet.
Yeah, I think we would all be a lot happier if we spent more time with our own minds and not everyone else's.
Boom. Love it. All right, let's jump into the last topic for today. The two kind of intertwine. Dragon Age: The Veilguard. The game director has left the studio after 18 years with EA. Corinne Bush, who was the game director of Dragon Age: The Veilguard since February 2022, has left BioWare. This was from Jeff Grubb over at Jeff Grubb and Eurogamer confirmed this. Apparently, BioWare is otherwise unaffected by further changes. Corinne played a key role in the Veilguard's final stretch of development following a decade-long production and multiple reboots. The game launched last October, received solid critical reception, and performed decently in sales, though it did not exceed expectations. This is just the note I pulled from the article. I heard there was a lot of discourse about the Veilguard for other reasons, so whatever. Commercial performance is reportedly unrelated to Corinne's departure, but I wanted to talk about this, and you had put it in here because the Veilguard is one of those games that went through a huge transformation. It apparently was a live service game until Anthem, I believe, was one of the catalysts that made them shift midway through production. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and it's weird because the previous title, Inquisition, was also about, it was also intended to be an MMOE kind of live service experience. And so a lot of the complaints about that game, although it's still, really good, is that those leftover elements from when they were trying to do that were still there. So it's weird that they basically already had, a false start on that and then still wanted to do it, and then Anthem just absolutely wrecked BioWare, and so they were like, nope, pull the plug, we gotta try something else.
Yeah. Let's see, some of the live service design elements still remain in the Veilguard. You and I haven't played this just yet. I know you finished Dragon Age Origins recently, right?
Yes. Incredible game.
Yeah, legendary. Veilguard apparently had linear narrative structure with lore delivered via scattered entries rather than immersive exploration. Hubs and combat arenas were clearly designed with multiplayer spaces in mind, in comparisons to Destiny's early struggles with disconnected storytelling and world building were brought to the forefront. BioWare has confirmed no expansions or DLC will follow for the Veilguard. The studio is now focusing on the next Mass Effect project led by a veteran team, and we still may get some quality of life updates for the Veilguard. In terms of the context and why we're talking about it today, Epos, is this sort of a shift that we're going to see more often, where maybe live service projects are going to be flipped or remixed into a single player style game?
I think so, and I'm hoping so. We saw, I think, the canary in the coal mine of this with the Suicide Squad game, where it was meant to be this online co-op live service thing, and it bombed because that is what brought it down. Everyone was like, if this were just a single-player game and you let us have the freedom that the single-player aspect of it would have provided, we would have loved it. And they took that, they did a couple seasons, were like, this is not working, and so they are just transitioning it to an offline mode and letting you have it as a single player experience. And I think we're seeing that I think that is an early ripple of things that are continuing to ripple through with a lot of these games, between cancellations and games not working out. And I think we're going to have examples of this, because that was my big thing with Anthem. Like, Anthem looked great. It looked like a lot of fun. I didn't care for the FOMO that I felt about its live service nature. And then lo and behold, it went away. I think it would have been a lot cooler if it had a single player element with it and the multiplayer was a separate like experience or kind of invasion kind of thing, like Souls games or something. Same thing with Veilguard. Like, they kept trying to figure out how to make Dragon Age a live service game. It kept not working, and I think it negatively harmed this game. A big thing that I brought this up for is the quote from someone else at the studio, who said the reality was, whatever we came out with, it was never going to match Dragon Age 4 in people's minds and people's imaginations. And I think that is true and not true. It is true in the sense we have talked about multiple times on this podcast. When you have a 10-year dev cycle, expectations just balloon. Like, absolute crazy.
Yep. We don't need games with the scope of 10 years, by the way.
Yes.
Players don't need that.
Yes. But also, yeah, exactly. You don't need to do that. And had you just delivered on what they had before, it would have been better received. And I'm hoping that I think it's the right call that they're not doing DLCs or expansions, that they're like, okay, we're going to take the L. This is the game as it is. We're not going to try to milk you more for it, and that they are putting those resources on Mass Effect, because I really hope that they are taking everything they learned from it and learned from the last Mass Effect, which had its own turbulence. It's become more appreciated in recent years, but it had its own launch issues. I'm hoping they take all of those lessons and really try to return to form, because it's weird. The devs really, really wanted, like, they were pushing reviewers to claim that the new Dragon Age is a return to form for BioWare. Clearly they want that, but that is not what they made. And I'm hoping that they have learned what they've taken from this, that they can do that for Mass Effect. I think ultimately transitioning whatever projects from live service to single player or to more accessible games is the right call. You don't have to scrap entire projects that have had years of work and millions of dollars poured into them, and you can give something to people that would have been received better. Like, I think that is, even if it's not the best game, like the article specifically says, even, whether we trust it or not is whatever, but the article specifically says the game's performance wasn't a factor here. Like, the game performed acceptable to EA from what I can tell. It wasn't game changing. It probably wasn't, hey, we spent 10 years on this, recouping that level of whatever. But it wasn't a complete bomb either. And I think if we can get more of that, if we can embrace more kind of mid-performing games and recover those projects, we, the gamers, get a lot more of those more unique experiences that might have been planned. And then we can shift away from this model of just developing 6 different trends at once and then canceling them all.
Square peg, round hole.
Yeah.
That's what I see when I see a 10-year gap, right? Origins, 2009. Dragon Age 2, 2011. Dragon Age Inquisition, 2014. 2 years between the first two games. 3 years. Yep, between the Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. And then 10 years between Inquisition and the Veilguard. That communicates to me not that you got a game of larger scale, because Origins and Inquisition are both like 50-hour games. Veilguard is about a 25-hour game. They're trying to take something that works and change it to fit a monetization model. Period.
Yes.
And it's not working, right? We just got the story from Jason Schreier that PlayStation 5, Sony has canceled 2 live service games, one from Bluepoint, one from Bend Studio. Apparently the Bluepoint one was a live service God of War game.
Yeah.
You
talk about square peg, round hole. Making these single player core franchises into live service games just doesn't make sense.
It makes me mad with the Bluepoint one, because Bluepoint killed it with their God of War collection, the Eco and the Shadow of Colossus collection, the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, Uncharted, the Nathan Drake collection. They do these sick remakes. Demon Souls, the 2020 Demon Souls, okay? And since then, you've had them plinking away on a God of War live service game that got canceled. Nobody's asking for God of War Fortnite. You can't. I know everybody looks at the big chart of playtime. You sent me a killer chart with just the amount of playtime people put on the live service games is stupid. Okay, it's a huge, huge majority of people's playtime. But that is dominated by 3 or 4 games. There is not room on that pie chart for there to be 10 live service games. It's one of those things where part of the reason they're so popular is because everybody's friends is doing it. Like they're on it. They're doing that thing. If it's so segmented, there's not room in the space for it. And then Ben's studio, they helped with God of War Ragnarok, but apparently they've been working on their own original live service version of the series. And the lessons are being learned, and I think it's tied in with the Veilguard. I don't want 10-year dev cycle games. 3 or 4 years seems appropriate, and I think players are very happy if they get a good 25 to 30-hour game that has good community support, like we highlighted, and you're just not waiting so long. The expectations that they're building are saying players demand and crave. I don't crave a new Horizon or God of War Ragnarok I get it. Those are once in a generation games, but you can't have everything chasing these trends. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want to tie this into an interview the former PlayStation Studios boss Yoshida gave on Kinda Funny Games, in which he said, if you want more of these single player games, you have to support remasters because they are what fund the games. And that, combined with the live service cancellations and things like Veilguard happening, to me, that is not the answer. That is showing as blatantly as possible the mismanagement that happens. Because yes, I know everyone says, and I will not deny it, like the new God of War games are great. I have a buddy who's been playing through Ragnarok and doing all the modes and stuff and says it may be the best game he's ever played, which is astounding. That's great. You don't got to keep making them that expensive. If it takes, because what I am seeing from that list where it's like, okay, Ben Studios helped with Ragnarok and now they're doing a God of War 1 and Bluepoint was possibly helping or doing a God of War game 2, is they want, because we also had the rumors of that Greek era God of War collection supposedly coming to PS5 with that mention of support remasters and live service. They are trying to fund the next God of War series game, whatever it's going to be. And they're going to fund, or they were going to try to fund it through a live service monetization thing and a remaster collection. If you need that much money to make your game, you are spending too much on the game.
Yeah.
And what stands out to me is you were going through the timeline of the Dragon Age games, and we're talking about scope and keeping scope manageable. That's not even the full picture. As the first 3 Dragon Age games were made, BioWare also made 3 and then 4 Mass Effect games, and they were working on Anthem.
Yeah.
Scope is seems so much more manageable on older games when they were juggling 2 different series, releasing a trilogy of sorts. Dragon Age technically wasn't a trilogy like Mass Effect, but 3 games on one, 4 games on another, alternating every couple years. Clearly, scope was managed a lot better then. And so it is hard to sell the players on, you need to do all this live service stuff and buy these remasters in order for us to make the next game, because the games just should not cost that every time, in my opinion.
So worried about The Elder Scrolls 6. Yeah. It's been so long at this point.
It is another game that whatever they make, as much as I may disagree with that quote, whatever they make will not live up to what The Elder Scrolls 6 could be. But that's a self-fulfilling problem.
I don't get that quote on why wouldn't you. Maybe he's speaking because they were put under the circumstances of we had to make a Dragon Age live service game and then remix it into a single player game. Maybe that's what he's saying. But when I hear it was never going to match the expectation of Dragon Age 4, why don't you just make Dragon Age 4?
Right.
Spend 4 or 5 years on it. Fable, all of these, anytime a game is past the 5-year development point for the most part, it's just well, that's probably going to suck because I don't think it's working.
Most successful sequels are just more of the game. I can't think of any real sequels that were successful enough to keep the series going that were radical departures from the franchise.
Yeah.
Any trilogy, any game with
it's
6
hard
entries.
To redefine yourself. It's hard.
Yeah. Every game was just more of that. That's what people want. And it's cool to do a secondary thing, but ultimately sequels should just be more of that. It shouldn't be, we got to make a new engine and a new console and a whole new team. And it should just be, the next one. Use the same engine if you have, like, it's fine. Dragon Age Inquisition looks incredible today, and it is 11 years old now.
Yeah.
It looks incredible. There was, in my opinion, no reason to do any, like, just make more of that. Just obviously improve it, but whatever. But, like, you don't need to reinvent everything.
But this happens in the industry. This is just the route, the way things go. Yeah. I'll end it with, again, saying, like, Astro Bot is Super Mario 64.
Yes.
But that concept evolved and done with a Sony flair. But it's still, like, a great game design is timeless.
Yes.
It's timeless, period. And we talk about FromSoft's games. I really like that they just keep improving on that formula. They do try other things, but it's in a different franchise. It's in Armored Core. Sekiro tried something different. It still was remixed on that original concept, but they didn't try and, like, Elden Ring 2 is not going to be like a God of War 2018 style reboot.
Right.
It's not. You know it's not going to be that thing. I'm glad we get creative wall-breaking experiences, but the 10-year games have got to go. Like, they can't be the bulk of what we're receiving.
And to my philosophy I stated earlier, my strategy is just going to be to just not pick those up. Like, if they make a live service thing, I'm not even going to try it. I'm not going to have expectations that won't be met. I'm just going to play the thing that is good. I'm going to support the thing that is good. I'm still going to play Veilguard because I want to play it with my own two hands and, like, experience it. But if they happened to spin up a Dragon Age Online or whatever, I'm going to be like, no, thank you. Now I'm going to go play Astro Bot.
Well, Yoshida's saying that we have to support remasters to get new single-player games. A counterpoint to that, we do. You and I, like, love remasters and HD collections and ports when they're done right. But why, we've mentioned this in the past, why do we need to immediately go to Digital Foundry on every HD remaster immediately before we buy it? They have burned that space. They've done low-effort things so often where it's typically worse than the original. Right. That's not how it should be. That should not be the standard. I guarantee you a group of fans could make the enhanced Legend of Dragoon version that I'm describing and do it for free. So why can they not throw the just pitiful budget required to do a decent job adding some enhancements and making sure it's up to the quality of the original, if not better?
Right.
That's an area that I hope does improve, period.
And that's why I was so excited for the supposed God of War collection, because it sounded more like that old school, like, we're just going to put all the games together and give them to you, not we're going to spend millions of dollars recreating this game and changing it.
Yep. PS3 era did the collection.
Yes.
This ecosystem much better, and they were
coming
out more often. PS4, PS5, I mean, look at PS5. It's like nothing. Why? Because they want you to subscribe to premium and stream the subpar version of the game. I would rather you make the killer HD collection that's really good so I can just buy it.
Yep. Not
be a part of your highest tier Netflix of games. They're still chasing monetization stuff.
Yep. Good show.
Excellent show. Much appreciated, sir. Where can people listen, watch, and find out more about your work?
EposVox or Lost Saves. Pretty much everywhere. YouTube, social media, Twitch. You got it.
Most excellent. Thanks again for everybody listening. Thanks for the viewer comments and questions. Keep those coming. We love seeing it. The support on this show has blown both Epos and I away. If you're on one of the podcast players, if you're on YouTube, we super appreciate you. This has been the most fun project, I think, for both of us. It's easy to say. And I just love getting to talk games with you. So until next episode, we will see you again very soon.
And go play games. Just play them.
Yes.